Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have so many of you joining us from across the U.S. My name is Lauren Bloomquist, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst for Education Commission of the States. I want to welcome you all and thank you for attending our webinar on aligning K-12, post-secondary, and workforce data. We have a great discussion in store with you today with the ECS team and our partner, ACT. Please note that we are recording the webinar today, so you can revisit the content and share it with your colleagues. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. Partnering for Success is designed to provide you, our commissioners, policymakers, education experts, and nonprofit leaders with opportunities for connection with peers, researchers, and innovators who are providing solutions to some of today's most pressing education policy issues. We intend for you to leave this webinar filled with ideas, resources, and connections that will support you as you address similar changes or challenges in your state. On behalf of the ECS team, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our partners who help make events like this one possible. Thank you for your continued partnership and support that allows us to convene the people behind the policy. Welcome to the final Partnering for Success for 2025. I'm especially pleased to join forces with ACT for today's important conversation. We have a wonderful panel today of state education leaders to highlight policy strategies for supporting students as they move through the K-12 education system. We are incredibly excited to hear from our partners and our panelists. During today's session, we want to hear from you as well. So as you follow along, please be sure to place any questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will address as many of those as we can after our panel discussion. Let's get started with today's important content. States are trying to better connect their education and workforce systems so that every student has a clear pathway from school to career. States are rethinking how students move from high school to post-secondary opportunities, be that career, college, or the military. They are creating policies that provide flexible opportunities to prepare students for next steps, creating space to be more inclusive of what success after high school means to individual students. Data alignment is crucial to helping education leaders understand how students move through pathways and what outcomes they achieve. We've seen a variety of policy trends in different areas that support these efforts. Some states have been moving beyond a single summative test score and consider multiple measures of readiness and through other assessments, advanced coursework, student experiences, and individual demonstrations of learning. This includes providing multiple graduation pathway options like Washington State. There are also states taking into account a variety of ways that students can demonstrate readiness and find success. For example, Ohio has readiness fields in 12 different areas. States are changing accountability systems to reflect what schools provide to ensure access and to help foster student success. Aligning accountability measures to learning opportunities helps schools and districts support student access and progress along post-secondary and workforce pathways. Making intentional connections to the workforce by offering or helping facilitate industry-recognized credentials or other personal learning options like work-based learning is helpful for students along their trajectory. For example, Texas has a list of recognized credentials for accountability, and Rhode Island allows students to earn credits for graduation through work-based learning. When it comes to accountability, we looked at all 50 states' accountability systems, and we found that at least 37 states use some measure of college and career readiness for school accountability. There are a wide range of indicators, highlighting the broad spectrum of what readiness means to individual states and individual students. I'll share some state examples on the next slide. States like Connecticut are broadening the definition of readiness by using multiple measures, including ninth graders on track, advanced coursework, post-secondary enrollment, and benchmark scores on college and career-ready exams. There are also states like Pennsylvania that are considering readiness all the way from elementary school through high school. They are using their Future Ready Pennsylvania Index. States are also including more career readiness measures. For example, South Carolina uses completion of work-based learning as a career readiness measure, and Kentucky requires a benchmark score for industry-recognized credentials approved by the Workforce Innovation Board for its accountability system. Finally, as states broaden what it means to be college and career ready, and as they begin to provide more student-centered pathways, using data and creating data systems that collect and connect these measures are important. Connecting K-12, post-secondary, and workforce data systems can help policymakers understand what policies are driving student success. As of 2024, there are at least 33 states, including Alabama and New Mexico, who you will hear from later, that have longitudinal data systems that are active or under construction. These are some of the policy questions that policymakers may have that data system alignment may help better answer. Up next, I'm pleased to have James Riddlesberger, Program Director for Accountability and Data Insights from ACT, along with state leaders from Alabama and New Mexico. I'm excited to turn it over now to James. Welcome, James. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Lauren. And it's wonderful to be here today. And thank you to all of you who are joining us for this webinar today. As Lauren said, my name is James Riddlesberger. I'm a Program Director for Accountability and Data Insights here at ACT. And I'm going to get out of the way as soon as I can because we're very excited to share with you today stories that we've been fortunate to hear from a couple of the states that we work with. And those will be the panelists who are about to present to you. So we're fortunate to have with us today Shanthia Washington, who's the Assistant State Superintendent for Evaluation, Accountability, and Support Unit at the Alabama State Department of Education. And she'll be sharing with you some of the exciting work that they are doing in Alabama. And then she'll be followed by Lynn Vasquez, who's a Senior Manager for Assessment, Research, Evaluation, and Accountability at the New Mexico Public Education Department. So in the interest of getting right into it, I will turn it over to Shanthia now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here today. As we talk about looking at Alabama's proposed model for accountability, just to give you a little insight into what we have here in Alabama, I want to first of all tell you that my background is basically in student assessment. I was brought to the department now, can't believe, 15 years ago. And in doing so, I was honored to be able to go through several systems as it relates to not only assessment, but also with accountability as well. And I think that probably the most exciting work to be done is what we are proposing to happen with the Alabama model today. So with that being said, I would like to, if you don't mind going to the next slide, allow us an opportunity to kind of take a look at where we are currently with our assessments and our accountability system. So in Alabama, we are an ACT state. And when we say that, we mean that all of our students in grade 11 are administered the ACT. In addition to that, we have 12th grade students that are administered the ACT WorkKeys. In doing so, it has allowed us an opportunity to be able to look at our students not just from the lens of college readiness, but also to look at them and through the lens of career readiness as well. In doing so, it affords us an opportunity to talk with employers across the state who look at these assessments as means of readiness for career preparedness. With that being said, Alabama currently, for the 22-24 school year, we test approximately a total of 74,000 students throughout our state. With those students, in case you don't know, there's various levels as it relates to ACT WorkKeys. The higher levels are the silver, gold, and platinum. With that being said, we've had about 43,147 students to score at those levels, as well as our high school students have earned like the National Career Readiness Certification has been about 35,663 students. So when we look at taking the work keys, we've had quite a bit of success with our students and them taking the assessment. So this is in addition to taking the actual ACT with writing. Every spring of the year, our 11th grade students are administered the ACT with writing. And we're looking at approximately 52,000 students who have actually tested this past spring, with 34,000 of those students, so probably about 68% of the students who took work keys in the 12th grade. Why is this information important? It is important to us because we do have in the state of Alabama, one of our accountability indicators includes college and career readiness. So with that being said, if a student scores high or meets one of those other indicators that we have for the state, such as testing appropriately on the work keys, dual enrollment, early entry into military. Those are just some of the examples of the college and career readiness indicators. Then if those students do that early on, some of them don't necessarily take the work keys currently. But with our new proposed system, as I talk through it a little bit later, you'll understand why it is so important for us to make certain we're continuing this process of being administered the work keys for the students, which currently about 68% of them in grade 12 are actually taking it currently, which equates to about 34,000 students. If you move to the next slide, you will see that what we plan to do with our proposed model, which I want to make clear, we have not yet presented this to the U.S. Department of Education. This is something that we have worked with a task force of individuals across the state of Alabama with all sorts of backgrounds, because in Alabama, we not only want to look at those students that are going to college, but also those students that are being prepared for a career. Because ultimately, I think all of us want to make certain that we have productive citizens that can join a workforce successfully. With that being said, we have really, got behind the work initiative and workforce development. In doing so, that has afforded us the opportunity to not only examine where we are currently with our current accountability system, but to see what we can do to make certain that we are affording our students an opportunity to be both college and career ready. So when we received this wonderful letter back in July that dealt, and everyone knows, most people who are on this call, we received a Dear Colleague letter from the U.S. Department of Education, and it afforded us the opportunity to seek creative ways of implementing waivers across the state. In doing so, this affords us an opportunity to not only take a look at what the accountability group and task force put together, but to also afford us an opportunity to see if we can possibly apply for one of the waivers that has been mentioned in the letter that we all received. So with that being said, we are going to seek a waiver, and mainly the key ingredient to our waiver is we currently allow all juniors to take the ACT across the state in the 11th grade, and we look at those proficiency results. So the waiver basically will bring in the NCRC, which is something that is produced through WorkKeys as a measure to look to see if the student is where they need to be academically. Next slide, please. So what this model basically will look like is our current ESSA model through our accountability system looks at ELA and math proficiency, and it's basically a one-dimensional model. This will apply, the new proposed model is to move into a system that not only looks at ACT and its proficiency results, but also to look at WorkKeys and its NCRC measuring results to see if our students are ready career-wise. Now, what we've basically done is we've taken a look at both of these assessments. And if you look at the table that you have before you on the slide, notice in the first column to the left, we're looking at levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 currently with ACT, with our ELA and our math. But in this proposed model, we want to take a look at the actual composite score for ACT and compare that to the NCRC levels, which I talked briefly about earlier, them being bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. Look at these levels and see where the two meet. I always say where the rubber meets the road. So see sort of kind of where these two meet to provide us with the opportunity to see where that student is relative to college and career readiness. If you look at the various colors, you will notice that for achievement purposes, it's basically done by tiers. So where you'll see the overlap with the red, of course, in those particular colored areas, we would not necessarily have students that are mastering the necessary standards or readiness level that we're looking for. But the yellow would indicate that they're close to being on track or at a level 2 level or somewhere making it be at a level 2 levels per se. But with the platinum, with the gold level, it would be in those cells that are green, and of course platinum being the most highest level, which would be in the cells that are colored blue. So basically those students would fall in one of those areas as the overlap between not just the ACT, but the ACT and the WorkKeys together, which would measure both college and career readiness. Next slide, please. So for the state of Alabama, we've kind of looked at our data, and this is sort of where our students fall across the state. And as you can see, we have some students who do overlap in certain areas, which would afford them an opportunity to say that they were truly college and career ready, because they would have what we would call the cognitive skills from the test, the ACT, plus we would also have the application skills from the WorkKeys assessment to provide us with the necessary data we would need in order to show that the students are both college and or career ready. In the state of Alabama, we're currently looking at about 28% of students being college ready. And this would afford us additional 28% of our students that would be career ready if we will also use the NCRC levels through WorkKeys. So that's giving us additional students that could basically qualify to be both college and or career ready, which we feel like is more of a true measurement for our state overall and not just a one-dimensional approach to looking at the students. So overall, that would then move our numbers to 56% of our students being prepared for success after high school, which is ultimately, we want to get that number to, of course, 100% if we can. But that will at least give us a true picture of where our students are across the state.
Thank you, Ms. Washington, for sharing Alabama's story. And Lynn, now I think we're ready to hear about New Mexico.
Yes. First of all, James, is my audio okay? I just want to say there's a lot of excitement in Alabama. I think it's an exciting model. I also really appreciate that Cynthia emphasized that, she's speaking to a future possibility. I likewise, in my presentation, will kind of speak to our current state as well as also the future possibility. Just before we begin, I just want to say good afternoon to everybody who could join, and thank you to James and Lauren, ECS and ACT for hosting this timely discussion. I know there's a varied audience here with us today, and if you're here as a New Mexico policymaker, school board member, education leader, reformer, or even a national organization that's working frequently here in New Mexico, I extend my appreciation for the work that you do, because the work you currently do and the work that we can collectively do together shapes opportunities for students across our state. In New Mexico, as we work to better connect our pre-K, not just K-12, but pre-K, through workforce education system, the question of college and career readiness is not abstract, but it's closely tied to our workforce needs, our rural, urban, and cultural context, our responsibilities to ensure that a high school diploma has real meaning after high school. And as a state with the second highest poverty rate in the nation, we're at 18.9%, just behind Louisiana. Our collective state goal is to improve economic mobility for our students and families. And I know that's been a very timely discussion on the radar as well. As we look at the slide that we're sharing right now, national research indicates that measuring college and workforce readiness requires the leveraging of multiple indicators, right? When you look at the education to workforce indicators, I think there might be around 99, but among those, we know there's the traditional ones that most states do carry or are required to carry even in their accountability models, whether it's academic proficiency, advanced coursework in high school, attendance, grad rates, but also the indicators. There's also other indicators that signal things like successful career transition and industry recognized credentials. Those are just like little slivers. And for here, although it's not part of our discussion yet for the academic achievement indicator for the ESSA model, we do have a presence of ACT WorkKeys. Now, granted, Alabama is a larger population. New Mexico, we have about 310,000 students in our K-12 system, about 22 to 25,000 students per grade level. But as part of the New Mexico's bundle of those CCR indicators, we utilize both ACT and the WorkKeys in our state accountability model under the ESSA school quality and student success indicator. And we're not alone in that. And I know there's a handful of other states that are also using WorkKeys as a standardized measure for that CCR indicator. This slide shows our accounts, which represents actually less than 5% of our graduates across those periods that you see. It's so marginal, especially when we consider that about 33% of our graduates go directly into the workforce. And based on the most recent survey that I could locate from 2023, and this is from the Department of Workforce Solutions, another state agency, a survey of about 482 New Mexico employers reported that only 28% of those candidates lacked the technical skills required for success. And so I really applaud actually our Department of Workforce Solutions. These WorkKeys experiences happen in New Mexico, not because of the public education department, although we leverage them, but in due diligence to our Department of Workforce Solutions, a different state agency, like I said, that is actually funding the delivery of WorkKeys to New Mexico students and those students even out of high school. I also want to note and especially acknowledge our colleagues at ACT for being partners in building a bridge between the public education department and our Department of Workforce Solutions. I'm sure Shanthia any state director of accountability will tell you that one of the trickiest parts is how do you create a system in which data is accessible? And so one of the challenges that we, in speaking with our stakeholders who the accountability model is applied to, one of the things that they signaled was the difficulty in being able to report WorkKeys data because that is not something that they have easy access to. So we wanted to break down that barrier for schools. And so part of that is creating a MOU. We're underway in developing a shared memorandum of agreement with Department of Workforce Solutions so that once they get the data, WorkKeys data from ACT, we can actually have access to that data through that data sharing agreement. And that decreases the burden and the workload of data reporting for our schools so that we can easily ingest that data and calculate that as part of our accountability model. On the next slide, just for context, I don't always assume that everybody that joins these calls are experts, although I'm probably speaking to the choir in some of the things that I've said. But what you see is just kind of a high level 30,000 foot view of our accountability model. And of course, you see what the ESSA requirement is from the Department of Ed, and then what New Mexico uses to meet that. I've highlighted for you that school quality and success indicator, that college readiness indicator. In our current model, it only applies to high schools, and it's about 5 points in the model. And of course, there's limitations and guardrails with ESSA that has to weight less than the, like, for example, the academic achievement indicator or the EL progress indicator. The next slide, I'm also framing a little bit here how it's addressed in our business rules. So in our current CCR model, and I've got a screenshot of our in-depth manual of how we crank out if you're going to make ratings or designations of schools. And of course, the purpose in doing that is for us, just like classroom teachers do, to identify the students that struggle the most in classrooms. We want to identify the schools that are struggling the most in preparing students for the future. So in our CCR business rules, what happens right now, our current state, is that it's really a laundry list of standardized tests, whether it's the ASVAB, International Baccalaureate, or AP. And then how it's weighted is if a student sits for the test, just sits down, answers questions, 30% is counted for participation. And then if they meet the cut score, they achieve a 3 or 4 on the WorkKeys, depending on which WorkKeys it might be, or the cut score for ACT or SAT, they get the success portion of the model applied. And then on the next slide, if you want to see how this might play out, because I think we are unique, I think we are the only state that does something called these shared accountability units. So what we do in our CCR model is we have 16, what we call that count of snapshots in state, that fourth column in. You'll see 16 in the first 3 rows. So it's when schools report data to the state, 40th, 80th, 120, and the end of the year. So there's 4 snapshots times 4 years of high school, so 16 snapshots. And so we actually, and this is established in rule by the state, so that even if a student was only in your high school for a portion of their high school academic career, you're being attributed either participation or success portion for that student. It's a very heavy business rule, data load, time intensive for both us and our districts. So just if you want to read more in depth about that, you can link to our technical manual, but I wanted to share that. I think most importantly are the last 2 slides. If we can go on to the next one. We, for those of you who may not know, we had a sufficiency lawsuit by 2 plaintiffs that this court condensed those, but essentially we're going to see a different future in our accountability model. We were required to come up with a plan to address certain subgroups for purposes of equity. And this is a page from that plan that we've laid out to reach out to stakeholder engagement, to develop community-based metrics, and to redesign a new accountability model. And so what I'm thinking is, what I'm going to show you next is the world of possibilities. And just like Cynthia said, this is not the world in which we live today, but I think it does, one of the big things about school quality success under ESSA is that it needs to align to your state policies and the state values. So starting this spring, in January, we're working with a national technical advisor to do a series of stakeholder convenings around the state. We want to collectively agree everywhere from pre-K to workforce development. What is it what are those indicators that we think in our system signal success for CCR? And so, for example, in the current model, there's only high school, those 5 points only or land at the high school. But we know that in middle school, we have students that are doing next step plan completion and thinking about the future and the opportunities for community service. I was recently had the opportunity to listen to a panel of students, and given the fact that we have a laundry list of standardized tests, when those students were were asked, what has made you successful, or what has prepared you to be ready for the next step? Things like internships, work-based learning, the opportunity to access CTE courses, or getting industry credentials really stood out. And so, we want to keep those things that matter on our roadmap for the future. We want to propose this in some of the community conversations, but also kind of leave open the world of possibilities that come from our external stakeholders. If I have just a few minutes, James, I'll just wrap up with kind of the last statement here. I think the CCR indicator sends a clear signal to our schools and about our priorities, our resources, and our expectations for such a diverse state. And today's topic is really just another prompting for us to re-envision our CCR. I also would put on the table, I think what Alabama is doing is exciting. And I think that is that a possible future for states to go? I think it absolutely is. I want to open the door and leave the door open for whatever might come out of our stakeholder convenings. But I think really the components, of CCR really addressing the future accountability model can serve as a tool for systems and longitudinal alignment between pre-K, higher ed, and workforce systems while keeping students at the center of our work. So thank you for allowing me to share what's happening in New Mexico currently and where we hope to go in the future, James.
Thank you so much. So we'll now go into the Q&A portion. So for those who are participating, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box that you can click on to submit a question. I would just start by asking both of our panelists, what advice would you have for other states who are considering a similar model to what you're doing in your state? And I don't know, maybe Ms. Washington, we can start with you.
The advice that I would like to make certain that I give to everyone is that, first of all, to survey and involve your stakeholders in the decision making, because it impacts them. When we pulled together the task force that I mentioned previously in the presentation, we made certain that we had all stakeholders at the table, to include not just our education family, but also our government officials, our ed organizations, students. We want to make sure that everyone was involved in the decision making so that they could tell us how this would impact them. We also wanted to ensure that we had business industry represented as well. So just want to make certain that everyone, regardless of what decisions that must be made, that you're pulling in all the necessary stakeholders, because it is amazing some of the feedback you can receive from them when you start thinking and planning out these types of systems.
Yeah, I think number one is really being clear about your state policies, strategies, identifying needs, right? The stakeholder engagement is super important. I told you, I shared with you that we're getting ready to do that for this spring. It definitely needs to be stakeholder informed from the spectrum. But sometimes what happens is, when you go into these public conversations, they don't always recognize the guardrails of ESSA. So people want to approach it with the biggest world of possibilities, but then we have to level set some expectations sometimes. But I think, being the state agency that provides the designations for schools in such a high stakes accountability model, right, where there's funding tied to this, I think aligning what is it that we as an agency agree on. We agree on, in New Mexico, we've agreed on the 5 things about improving math and literacy, improving attendance, improving grad rates, shared accountability, and then thinking about those underlying things that support those bigger conceptual ideas. And then does your accountability model signal the things that you say are important? And so, as we say that, there needs to be a balance of both college and career readiness, and we look at the workforce landscape and the needs of our future workforce. I think really taking into consideration that kind of triad, right? What is your state system aligned to what your community is saying? Does your community recognize recognize the limitations and guardrails. So just some places to start there, if that helps.
Lynn, I'm so glad that you stated that, because in Alabama, we actually worked on an Alabama Achieves strategic plan, and that is sort of what guided us to even convene the group from the beginning anyway. We wanted to make certain, as you stated, it is very important to make certain that, there is alignment between the goals of the overall state and the priorities of the state. And with that particular strategic plan, of course, we also had community involvement in that. So making certain that everything aligns and provides us with transparency around the data, because the accountability model is supposed to reflect, as you stated, the alignment with your priorities for your state, and making sure that you're pulling in the appropriate data and making certain that you're reaching the necessary goals. So I do agree with you, that is definitely important.
Thank you both. I think you both started to touch on this, but one of the questions that we have for you is, who are the key stakeholders that you're involving in your process, and how have you gathered feedback from them? And in particular, as some folks are asking, if you have methods other than surveys that you've been able to use to engage folks.
We have used, besides surveys, because we have used surveys, and of course we pull together actual, a group of individuals, but you also did a lot of focus group work. Like right now, what we were doing, we started with of course, with our board to provide the information that the actual group came up with, their findings and what they wanted to do in the proposed model that I just presented to you guys. But in addition to that, we're working with smaller groups like our Superintendents Association, our Teacher Association, our Administrative Association. So we're also working with the smaller groups along the way as we try to gain insight from them as to, what is your opinion on the model? Do we need to make any adjustments or tweaks? How do you think this would work, with your students? Would it provide you with the necessary data that you would need that would gleam important for you in meeting your goals? So that's one approach that we decided to use outside of just doing, just the surveys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we've had a lot of success doing regional stakeholder convenings, not where we're necessarily leading, but we're co-facilitating. And we have other in-state partners, whether it's the Lannell Foundation or other nonprofits that have a heavy interest in education, to help lead those conversations. One of them is because we want to build good bridges with our in-state partners as well. I also, would add that we don't want to be remiss to recognize that whether, some of our in-state partnerships like Teach Plus, they've already convened a group of stakeholders around some of these topics. And so we want to be able to ingest some of the information that's already been gathered by our partners around other stakeholder convenings that they have conducted. But, we've had great turnout on different convenings topics that we've had. We have a responsibility to put anything that we change in our state consolidated plan, which part of the accountability model is, has to be served by with public comment periods and so forth. For us, it's so important in Mexico that we hear from our 23 indigenous tribal communities. And then with the lawsuit in particular, we are aiming for those families, those that in organizations that represent students that are historically marginalized. And so, that we, regardless of the lawsuit exists or not, we would always aim to do that. But I think when we think about the future of the accountability model in particular, I think Shentia and in the division that Alabama has, really trying to find that balance of, does our current system really authentically signal career readiness? And I think I would say ours probably doesn't. And I think that is something that's why, looking at what is the true value, how do we define that? Developing a framework around that, and do we have the right indicators and the right data collection systems to gather that? But I think that's also part of those conversations that we have with our stakeholders. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. And then another question that we have here is, as you're thinking about using the WorkKeys assessment, how do you envision connecting WorkKeys results to practice?
Well, we've already started in Alabama with taking like the WorkKeys results and using it for employability purposes with students. There are various entities across the state that require WorkKeys as one of the foundational tools utilized to determine whether an applicant is ready for the workforce in particular areas that they may have vacancies. So we have worked with our workforce development industry to make certain that our students have the necessary skills that are needed, what they need, and vacancies that they need to fill throughout the state. By doing so, that affords us an opportunity to take the results in any areas where students need to improve upon. We can work with those results to make certain that those students get what they need, the intervention needed to make certain they can apply the skills needed so that they can secure the jobs that are necessary, that require necessary skill set for the students to perform well and to even get hired. And many students have found this to be, helpful for them to be able to take the assessment while they're still in school, gives them an opportunity to be afforded a job before they even graduate from high school. So we have found this to be a big advantage for our workforce development opportunities for our students.
Yeah, I think for us, I just want to recognize that states are likely at different places, right? I think, interestingly, when I pointed out that the Department of Workforce Solutions has the WorkKeys contract, and then looking at, they probably have a closer heartbeat or a closer direct line to what workforce development needs and employability needs actually are in the state. And I'm sure if I had my College and Career Readiness Bureau colleagues here, they could probably answer this question much more eloquently, James. But I would say I think we're, looking at our numbers, I think it's really about opportunity and access. I think we have an obligation, and this is why that building that bridge was so important for us. We want to elevate the numbers of students that have access to WorkKeys. Given the fact that it's 100% funded, and I think Department of Workforce Solutions, because they don't have immediate access into the K-12 space, we want to open that access up. We want to be able to partner in promoting this. And I think that's why it's important, given that the fact that I said that about a third of our graduates go directly into the workforce. And how do we give them tools to be able to do that? I see WorkKeys as one of the low-hanging fruit tools for us to provide opportunity and access for those students, and not just for those students, but for all students actually. So,
Great, thank you. I have a question specifically for Lynn for New Mexico. What was the thinking for the future model to have internships and work-based learning experience under other school and community supports rather than workforce readiness?
Yeah, Jessica, that's a great question. That what I had on the slide was just me getting up early one morning. I actually presented that slide for the first time last week at Santa Fe Community College at a Teach Plus Economic Mobility Summit. It was me thinking about how do I go into these stakeholder feedback groups or stakeholder engagements in the spring and show what the world of possibility could be. And it was just me kind of mentally mapping where things might fall. I hope what happens if you're in New Mexico is that you attend, or please send me an email. And if you have different ideas about that, I would love to hear, because I think that's the biggest service, the public service that we can do as state employees is really listen to our stakeholders and think about how to use different lenses and perspectives of where some of those things might fall. We may not end up with 3 buckets, and I'm willing to accept that at the end of the day. I think just like Shanthia said about this is a possibility. It's not in place yet, but I wanted to kind of give a sketch of what the world might look like. So it's nothing hard, fast, just something that came out of my head super early in the morning. So thanks for asking that question.
Thank you. Another question that we might have is, as you go out and engage with your stakeholders in thinking about your proposed models here, how have you navigated the skepticism that you sometimes hear from stakeholders when talking about these sorts of plans?
You want me to start, Cynthia? One, I have a mantra, is to approach everything with the greatest sense of possibility. I also think, you know, the transparency. When you're in these types of roles at the state level, you have to live with what has been landed on today, what's in place today, and you have to credit like what is happening today wasn't just by accident. It's probably what stakeholders were thinking 6-7 years ago, right? And then we also have to, while we're doing what we're doing today, plan for the future. One of the things that makes it easier when we go out to do stakeholder engagement is I have a statewide assessment and accountability advisory group that for the past 2 or 3 years, it used to be a group just of assessment and accountability and data people from districts and charter schools. 3 years ago, I opened the doors to that committee, my statewide committee. We meet once a month, to also include our nonprofit organizations that sometimes will, it's harsh to hear, but they will criticize us. I think, how do you build, bridges and opportunities and invite that criticism in advance? And so actually, I shared that same slide with the subcommittee of my statewide assessment and accountability committee. And I think them just having a window insight. And then they were also able to add some things that I had not thought about into that slide as well. And so that's just one strategy and it's not a strategy for manipulation of any kind, but I think it's just really being authentic and transparent and working with the structures or the infrastructure you have, and then figuring out how do you expand that infrastructure so that when you are getting ready to do stakeholder engagement, you already have advocates or people in the field that are aware of what your future plans are.
One of the things that we do in the state of Alabama is we don't necessarily do the presenting ourselves. We involve the stakeholder groups to be our biggest cheerleaders, because they're the ones who have come up with some of the ideas, and then they can pitch it to other individuals, other groups that we meet with, other committees that we may engage with. That afford us a bigger opportunity for them to really get to know and get in tune to whatever it is that they've come up with within the committee meeting. It also affords an opportunity to have one-on-one conversations when individuals may say something and they're skeptic about a particular component. By them being those people in the trenches, that affords them an opportunity to be able to respond appropriately and give them not only the good, but the bad and the ugly concerning it as well. So we basically allow our stakeholder groups to take the lead with those meetings. And we definitely are there at every one of them and provide them with the necessary support that they need. But we kind of are hands off at that approach and allow them to be the ones to really explain the information to those particular individuals themselves. And we found that to be very successful for the reasons that I just previously mentioned.
Yeah, I think, something that I've heard in New Mexico a lot is don't create something and then ask us for permission or approval, but how do we draw in our stakeholders to be co-creators of it? And that's not always easy sometimes because people don't know what they don't know, right? But I think that idea of co-creation, I think Cynthia is on the right track about having somebody else facilitate while we're present. We've used that. It's been successful here as well. But we also want to feel like our stakeholders have a role in co-creating. Yeah.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that's coming up here is if there's an ability to use information beyond WorkKeys scores when we're thinking about workforce and particularly about workforce data. I don't know if that's something that you all have explored in either New Mexico or in Alabama, or whether working with sister agencies in the state government or working with employers across your state. But I wonder if you have anything that you can share about that.
I'm not sure if I
Go ahead,
understood.
Come
I'm
on,
not sure if I understood the question, James. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think the question is basically how can we use workforce data in other ways that we haven't mentioned yet, if there are any efforts underway in your states.
Well, we always receive workforce feedback from the workforce concerning applicants, concerning new hires, and the necessary skills. And that's basically done through our workforce development team here at the department, working with the workforce development for the state with the state workforce development team. So in essence, that provides us with the opportunity to really see what skills are needed for the various jobs that are out there throughout the state. And it also affords us an opportunity to see what specific skills that are needed for our students to have. And then with that being said, it affords our educators to make sure that we are improving in those particular areas. So we're retrieving data from them on a regular basis, workforce development, retrieving information from the industry so that we can know specifically what we need to do in order to improve employability skills across the state.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's what Cynthia described is very common. We have an entire college and career readiness bureau that is dedicated to working across multiple stakeholders, and so I'm sure that what she described is happening across states.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think we're ready to pretty much wrap up here. So I would like to thank both of our panelists from Alabama and New Mexico for joining us. Excited to carry on the conversation about WorkKeys, and I'll hand it off to Lauren to close us out here.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and for joining us today. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be sharing our contact information shortly so that you can follow up with us directly. We truly appreciate your time and engagement, and we'd like to give a big thank you to James, Shanthia, and Lynn for sharing their insights and perspectives. To everyone in our audience, please remember that Education Commission of the States is here to support you in your work. We hope that today's webinar has offered at least one takeaway that your state can explore or adopt. If you have any follow-up questions or requests related to today's session, please do not hesitate to reach out. As I mentioned, today's session is being recorded, and we will share it with you in our post-event email. Please stay tuned for next year's webinars. In the meantime, ECS is accepting proposals on innovations and advances taking place in your state for our national forum in Washington, D.C. Please see the link in the chat if you'd like to send a submission. Thank you again for joining us today. Enjoy your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2026. Thanks, everyone.